Welcome back to episode 2 of MythoPsychoa. I'm Rowan, and today we're going to be talking about Adonis, his relation to the Puer Aeternus archetype, and how those relate to psychology. So, in Greek mythology, Adonis was an extremely handsome young man. Like, extremely. Think Eartha Kitt walking down the street. Everybody stops to turn and look at her. Except he was a boy. Beautiful. Less beautiful, he was born from an incestuous relationship. It was between King Cinyras of Cyprus and his daughter Mira. In order to escape the king's wrath, Mira was transformed into a myrrh tree, and Adonis emerged from that tree's bark as a baby. As he grew into a beautiful youth, he caught the attention of Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. She became enamored with him and entrusted Adonis to the care of Persephone, goddess queen of the underworld. However, Persephone also fell in love with Adonis and refused to give him back. This dispute between the two goddesses was settled by Zeus, who decreed that Adonis would spend 1/3 of the year with Aphrodite, 1/3 with Persephone, and 1/3 wherever he chose. Adonis chose to spend his free time with Aphrodite. He continued on to become an avid hunter, despite Aphrodite's warnings about the dangers, and one day while hunting, Adonis was fatally wounded by a wild boar. Some versions of the myth say it was sent by a jealous god like Ares or Apollo. As Adonis lay dying, Aphrodite sprinkled nectar on his blood, causing flowers called anemones to grow, which, before I started studying this, I didn't even know that anemones were anything but a sea creature. But they're a really pretty flower if you look them up, or if you remember them, if you ever watched Midsummer, and she's wearing that beautiful headdress with all of the flowers, and the flowers that seem to be kind of pulsating. I think those were anemones. In some tellings of the myth, back to Adonis' story, his spirit returns from the underworld each spring, symbolizing the cycle of death and rebirth in nature. And also, due to Aphrodite's grief over his death and her pleas to Zeus, Zeus actually turned the once mortal into an immortal. So next let's talk about Adonis as the Puer Aeternus archetype. The myth of Adonis exemplifies the archetype Puer Aeternus, which translates to eternal youth, in several key ways. The first as youthful beauty and vitality. Adonis is renowned for his exceptional beauty and youthful vigor. As a puer figure, he embodies the allure, the promise of youth, and all of the opportunities that can bring. His physical perfection represents the idealized potential and unblemished nature of the puer, but of course, there's always another side to that coin. Tragic early death. The premature, violent death of Adonis aligns with the puer's association with an untimely end. Many puer figures in mythology die young, never reaching full maturity. This reflects the archetype's connection to unfulfilled potential and arrested development. Cyclical rebirth. Adonis's annual return from the underworld mirrors the puer's theme of eternal youth and renewal. This cycle of death and rebirth represents the puer's resistance to permanent change or growth, always returning to a youthful state. This next part of the archetype is interesting. Divine relationships. Adonis's romantic entanglements with goddesses like Aphrodite and Persephone showcase the Puer's tendency to form intense but unstable relationships, often with idealized or unattainable partners. These divine love affairs highlight the Puer's difficulty with ordinary human connections. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Pan syndrome, but shout out to all the man children on these dating apps. Okay, next. Lack of paternal influence. The absence of a strong father figure in Adonis's upbringing, due to his unusual birth, is characteristic of the Puer archetype. This often results in an underdeveloped sense of boundaries and lack of realistic limitations. The last part of the archetype I'd like to talk about is the passion for dangerous pursuits. Adonis's love of hunting, despite warnings, exemplifies the Puer's attraction to risky and thrilling activities. This recklessness often leads to the Puer's downfall, as it did for Adonis, and it's reminiscent of youth feeling indestructible. Now on to the psychological principles related to the Puer archetype. The Puer Aeternus, as exemplified by Adonis, corresponds to several important psychological principles. The first one I'll talk about is arrested psychological development. The Puer archetype often manifests in individuals who struggle to fully mature emotionally or take on adult responsibilities. This can result in a Peter Pan syndrome, where one remains psychologically stuck in adolescence despite physical aging. And if you're a modern person in the world, you've probably encountered some in your dating life. My condolences. The next psychological principle, fear of commitment. Puer-dominated personalities frequently exhibit a deep-seated fear of commitment and settling down. This may manifest as constantly seeking new experiences, jobs, or relationships without forming lasting attachments. Next, idealization and disillusionment. Those strongly influenced by the Puer archetype tend to idealize potential partners or life situations, only to become quickly disillusioned when reality fails to match their fantasies. This cycle can lead to a pattern of intense but short-lived enthusiasms. Difficulty with authority and structure. Puer types often chafe against authority figures in structured environments. They may struggle in traditional work settings or resist societal expectations, preferring to maintain a sense of freedom and possibility. Back to the coin analogy. It's not all bad, so let's talk about a potential good side, which is the creative potential and inspiration. While the Puer archetype does present challenges, it also carries positive aspects. Puer energy is often associated with creativity, inspiration, and the ability to think outside conventional boundaries. And this can lead to innovative ideas and artistic expression. This leads to the next psychological point of individuation and integration. Jungian psychology emphasizes the importance of integrating archetypal energies for psychological health. For those influenced by the Puer, the goal is not to eliminate youthful qualities entirely, but to balance them with more grounded. This archetype senex, which is the wise old man. So don't get rid of the youthful qualities completely, but balance them with the Synexian traits. And this integration is part of the individuation process, leading to a more whole and balanced personality. On to the mother complex. The Puer archetype is often linked to a complex relationship with the mother figure. This can manifest as an overly close attachment or a rebellious rejection of maternal influence. Understanding and working through this complex is crucial for psychological growth. Anima projection. Male Puer types may be prone to projecting their anima, which is the inner feminine aspect, onto idealized women, as Adonis did with Aphrodite. This can lead to unrealistic expectations in relationships and difficulty relating to real women as complex individuals. And if you're listening to this and either it's helping you understand yourself or someone else, of course, I'm using the story of Adonis to give a lens into these insights, but as he's male, if you're not, replace these with any gender that makes sense to you. And now on to shadow integration. The negative aspects of the Puer, like irresponsibility and recklessness, often reside in the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche. Acknowledging and integrating these shadow elements is essential for personal growth and avoiding destructive patterns. And the final psychological principle I'll talk about is transcendent function. Jung's concept of the transcendent function involves finding a middle ground between opposing psychological forces. For the Puer, this means finding a balance between youthful enthusiasm and mature responsibility, spontaneity, and commitment. It's definitely a balancing act, which can be said about much of life. And in conclusion, the myth of Adonis provides a vivid illustration of the Puer Aeternus archetype, embodying themes of youth, beauty, tragic fate, and cyclical renewal. This archetype, when understood through the lens of analytical psychology, offers insights into various psychological principles and patterns of behavior. By recognizing and working with these archetypal energies, individuals can strive for greater self-awareness and psychological integration, ultimately leading to a more balanced and fulfilling life. Since Adonis did become a god, he became immortal, he is associated with fertility, vegetation, beauty, of course, but also rebirth. So I think that rebirth can kind of offer a chance to know yourself in the process of integration. And that's what I really love about mythology. I think it offers a really cool way, interesting way to see inside ourselves and others and understand life a little better. And I will end with that. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, I release episodes every other Wednesday. The anemone flowers on the screen are ones that I painted. If you're interested in more of my art or anything like that, Rowan Blythe 333 pretty much is the same on all of my socials like TikTok and Instagram. And as always, I hope that you and your family, your loved ones, are doing well.